First of all, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I guess I just wanted to start with maybe you telling me a bit about Eruptive Games and your role in the company, and then we'll talk about kind of why you got into it.
The role, I was the founder, CEO of Eruptive Games, which was originally named Kaboom Games, but because of a copyright issue with Activision, where they had a game out called Kaboom, registered in 1982. We got a slap on the wrist saying, out of the blue, saying cease and desist because you can't use Kaboom.
How far into the process was that?
We were a year and a half in.
Wow.
Oh, the process of having the name?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the name for at least a year and a half, and then all of a sudden, as we got bigger, we got a little bit more notoriety. People, the gaming industry knew about us because we were developing games and literally impacting the future of social mobile gaming. Like, we were one of the very first companies that did that.
Wow.
So we got a lot of attention, got a lot of press, and so Activision went, whoa, you can't use Kaboom.
Wow.
So they sent us a letter talking about copyrights. And although they have never used that IP in, 20 years.
Really?
It didn't matter. They're like, you can't use it.
Did they say anything about they had plans to use it? Or
Nope,
just didn't?
They didn't need to. They just said, we own the rights.
They did because they
can't use Kaboom in gaming. Change your name.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's how I came up with the name Eruptive Games. Really because we were making games for the male genre, right, at the time. So that's how it started. So literally fell into my lap, gaming, and I love the creative process of things. And before you knew it, we were raising millions and millions of dollars and launching one of the bigger social mobile gaming companies in North America.
Wow,
yeah.
That's amazing. I guess kind of going babackwards a little bit. Why video games? What opportunities did you see in it that made you want to be a part of it?
Money.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time when I started looking into it, because I knew this 24-year-old kid that started, he literally ripped a game off from bulletin boards and put it on Facebook, and he was making $25,000 US a day.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
did you run into copyright issues?
Not that I know of. No, which is really interesting because he took a game that's been out a long time, he just renamed it, and just used the same mechanics. Right, so I think the issue is, from my experience, that getting, not trademarks, but getting a patent on technology is really not easy to do, especially the mechanics of gaming, right? Because the mechanics of gaming is built on the foundations of gambling, it's built on the foundations of incentivization, all those things, virtual currencies, so it's close to rocket science formula. It really is. Like games that make billions and trillions of dollars on virtual currency, it took a lot of manpower. It took a lot of artificial intelligence. It took a lot of AI. It took a lot of data. It took a lot of intelligence to get a game profitable on stuff like that, on formulas like that. So I don't think he did. I don't know. But I know that we didn't have any problems with copyright or trademarks or technology.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because it's really hard to come up with a formula because every game is different.
Right.
Right? So it's not that easy to take one formula and then cookie cut it for any type of game.
For sure.
It doesn't work that way. It's much more complex. Right? So.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then I also read in an interview that you wanted Eruptive Games to be able to be made into graphic novels and movies. And I probably know the answer, but why was this important to you?
I think at the time when I launched in kind of that space, games were really very flat. They were very one-dimensional. We wanted to create games that are heavily branded. We had a couple of games that were quite successful, but then I came up with a storyline that was really cool, and it was called Citizen Grim.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just really made to be made into a movie. It had a script. It was, it's just like a lot of really successful video games today have movies made.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of following the same kind of path.
Right.
But no one's ever done it for social mobile gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that made us really innovative at the time was we did all these things that, it's a very new space, a new industry, and we spearheaded a lot of this stuff. Right?
Yeah. Do you think that made you more impressive to investors?
Hands down. We told better stories. I mean, Facebook used us tons as a media darling or a gaming darling in the industry, right? At every event by Facebook, every event by social gaming, a lot of social mobile gaming events still exist today. And back then, we were shown at every single event, every trade show, everything. So we got a lot of exposure. So that really, but it also exposes you to things like copyright and trademark issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to ask because I guess when you go into a company like this, having the mindset that it's going to be made into other things, you know that the rights are going to have to be sold probably eventually, right? So what kind of, I guess I'm wondering, what were kind of the key copyright considerations you had from the get-go? And either just creating the company or creating individual games.
Yeah, so there's multiple answers to that because there's multiple arenas to that. One is our own internal IPs, right? We just pretty much trademark,
right?
And we didn't copyright much, to tell the truth, because again, we didn't get to the stage where we went into movies. We didn't get to that stage of it because we merged the company before then. So we didn't really have to get heavily into that. But we did take on a lot of partnerships. So one of the partnerships we had was with NBC Universal. Okay. So we had G.I. Joe. We had a whole bunch of games licensed from NBC Universal. So it's one of our biggest clients. Yeah. So, so much copyright and trademarks from NBC because when you start building video games that are brand driven, you have a brand involved in it. Right. Because a lot of times back then, and it still is today, you take a hit movie and you make it into a video game. Mm-hmm. Right? Game of Thrones, you can make that into a Game of Thrones video game. Totally. There's a lot of copyright and trademarks coming down the pipe, right? Not just from the license holders like NBC Universal, right? But from the properties or the owners of that brand. Mm-hmm. So it keeps trickling down the line of who can use it, who has accessibility to it, what can you get away with, what you can't, right? That whole Marvel universe now. Video games, comic books, movies, but they're all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. Fantastic Four was owned by Fox. It can't be used by Disney. It's this convoluted mess of who owns the IPs. Yeah. Right. So when it comes to that, dealing with brands for video games, it was much more complex.
Sounds chaotic.
Well, it's more of there's a lot of red tape, tons of red tape. There's a lot of things you can't do, things you can do. You have to get everything approved all the time. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that probably slows down the process a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, just the documents alone that comes down from their lawyers, right? It's just, they're this thick. Yeah. And it's just a lot of work that comes out of that. Yeah. But for our internal brands and IPs, we just trademark them, copyrighted some stuff, but then at the end of the day, unless we plan to license that out, but we never ever got to the point to doing that. Right. So,
interesting. Yeah. Kind of on that topic, I'm wondering at what point in the process of starting this company you were talking to lawyers. Was it right from the very beginning, or was it?
Oh God, no. No. Yeah. No. At the beginning, we literally just did what we love to do. We just built games, right? We were, as every startup, you get your hands dirty. You get your hands really dirty. You start developing creative, developing the technology, getting to MVP and beta. You don't really think about trademarking and copywriting, right? You don't until at some point when I really think it's the crossroads of when you get people have heard of you. Once your brand starts to expand, then you start to realize, we need to start trademarking and copywriting this stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess also on that topic, when you talk about kind of the creative aspect of the creative part, did you ever feel like you were confined by copyright claims of others during that process? Did you feel any constraints there.
No, again, I think the constraints is when you're working with other brands,
For sure.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you have brands like NBC or Universal, you have to abide by their regulations and their
Right.
all their paperwork, like all their legalities have to be to the cross your T's, dot your I's on them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then a little bit of a side topic, just out of curiosity, when you did end up putting the games out, do you remember if you had anything in your user agreements that disallowed mods, or did you have any stance on like modifications, user modifications?
When we put them out, like who? What do you mean in terms of other developers?
In terms of like
teams?
users, like players making modifications to your game.
Oh,
like
they didn't have the ability to make modifications to our games. But I did have an incident where we outsourced technology for one of our games to a Russian development firm. And here's what's interesting. So we used them a very short period of time because we did a good job, so we fired them. And about 2 years later, I had one of my contacts reach out to me in the industry and showed me a screenshot of one of our games, but converted to Russian.
Oh my gosh.
So this Russian development company took our assets, used it, and launched the game without our permission, which I mean like infringes on all all rights. And it was very hard to sue them because they were overseas. Mm-hmm. So back then, I don't know if it's different today, but it was really tough to throw a lawsuit on a foreign company, especially in a country like Russia, right? Where as you know or don't know, half the economy is under the table. Like that's how they function. It's illegal, not legal, right? So because it's like that, who are you going to sue, right?
Yeah,
Lawyers are going to sue who, right? So that was really, really frustrating and yet eye-opening that if you use foreign development firms like that, they can sometimes be really snaky, take your assets and your IP, and then reuse it. Yeah. And they resold it to multiple.
Wow.
Yeah. So when they built whatever portion of technology for us, they took that. Not just did they take the ones and zeros and resold it to repackaged it for other companies, but they also repackaged our assets. So all the graphic assets were reused.
Wow.
Like so blatantly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So blatantly.
Definitely a limitation of I guess the law when you start getting international.
So we reached out to the team that built it and we said, the fuck? Yeah. This is illegal. We're going to sue you. You better remove this. And they're like, well, it's not us. We didn't do it anymore. We sold it to another company, and they're using it. Crazy.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow, that's interesting.
So foreign trademark copyright issues, it's I believe the sea of gray area because we talked to our lawyers, but we couldn't do very much about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I guess in a different topic, kind of, same idea. Did you ever worry when you were making these games, like thinking like, yes, I'm going to sell them, but did you worry that when you did, it would be turned into something you didn't like or that you weren't proud of to be attached to, or that wasn't something you cared about?
You know my ethos. We never released anything that we didn't think we were going to be proud of. Yeah. Yeah, we never did that.
But if you were going to give the rights away, I guess, to somebody who could then work with them or like make them into a movie or something like that.
Yeah, we never did, but I can tell you this right now, that if I was to do that as a creative director by trade as well, I would have slapped a lot of restrictions on it. Yeah. I would have made it very difficult for them to alter the course of the story or whatever it may be, or a brand. But listen, I can tell you this, like, unfortunately we live in a world where money talks. Right? So if we had some sort of deal with, I don't know, a big movie studio, and I've heard this a lot, they'll come in and they'll slap a lot of money down and say, we want the ability to change this, and this, because you have to realize it's about audiences, and if we can alter this, we'll get a bigger audience, so forth and so on. And I know that's how it works, right? But I think just like any any sort of rights for artists, that's really that's what everyone battles for.
Yeah.
Right? Creative rights to retain who they are, what the brand is, what they stand for. And often, have to deal with what money brings to the table and what you're willing to change. Right? So, but we never get to that point. But the reality is we probably bend a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? More than I think that we would bend.
Yeah.
We probably bend more than I think we would.
More than you want to think you would.
Yeah. I bet we would. Right? But ultimately, because we're a video game company, players are a very cultish group.
Right.
Even just recently, I think about a year ago, I went to check the Facebook channel for Citizen Grimm, and 8 years later, they're still clamoring for us to bring it back.
I noticed that.
I don't. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Where is this coming back?
Yeah.
It's a massive cult. We had millions of players, right? So they're very, very, determined.
Loyal.
They're very loyal.
Yeah.
And if you change and alter the story, even made to a movie or whatever it may be, you get a lot. Yeah, you get a lot of feedback for it. That happens with the whole comic book industry, right?
Sure.
When Disney changed Marvel, or even DC made their comic books into movies, where do you think all these actors go to every year to promote their movies? They go to Comic-Con, right? Because they need to appease the fans.
Yeah.
Because audiences of comic books and video games are very cultish. They're very specific on what they know and what they believe to be the storyline of things. Right? So you kind of got to. I think it's beyond the licensing aspect of it. So I think you're at the point where it's about staying true to fans that do pay your way, right? Because they pay the bills, especially in gaming. Because in gaming they pay, right? Or in movies they pay movie tickets. So you need to appease these, and it's quite a bit above what licensing is meant to do, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting factor. I never actually thought about that, but that's so true. And then finally, coming to the end, I guess I was just wondering, overall, what your experience with Canadian copyright law was throughout the process. Was it something that you thought about a lot? Did you feel like it was effective in protecting your interests? I guess it wasn't with the Russia example. Or did you feel like it was restrictive or limiting?
I think, in many industries, it could be more pronounced than in gaming. But I think back in the day, because it's technology-based, it was much harder to patent, much harder to trademark.
Right.
Because tech is always a convoluted, very robust kind of business model, right? And we did something that many games didn't do until probably the last 4 or 5 years, is really put way more investment into the branding, into the identity and the entity of the games.
Right.
And creating storylines and doing things that are above and beyond just putting in a video game. A social mobile game that is, because a lot of legacy games like Xbox, PS3 games, they're a little bit more inclined to put a lot of heavy branding into it, because, in order to build a game like that, you're already a really big company.
Right.
Right? Because if you're Xbox or you're Sony or you're Activision, you have the money to put massive brands to it, or to promote branding.
Yeah.
Where social mobile gaming, you had thousands of developers, right? There's a new little game out every day. So in a sea of so many games everywhere, no one really thought too much about branding and storylines, because they just kept pumping out games, right? It's about making money, about monetization. But we really took our time, and every game we put out, we didn't put out that many, but the ones that we did put out, right, we spent a lot of time making sure that fans would love this game, users would love the game, they'd fall in love with the brand, they want input, right? And I think this is what builds successful gaming companies, is their ability to connect with their audience, right? A lot of game companies back then didn't do that, because they were just about pumping out games, making money. Yeah. And then that game died, pump out another game, using the same formula, make money. And that died, and move on and on. Right?
Oh, interesting. Do you think, and I guess last question, even not even just video games, but also in tech, like you have a lot of experience there. Do you think if it did become easier to like copyright things, if it would make developing tech harder? Like, if it would, do you think it would slow down the development of tech?
That's a loaded question because I don't think it can be made easier because of the evolution of tech.
Right.
Right. Like I think if technology doesn't change and we weren't innovative companies and innovative people, then yeah, I mean, you as lawyers can, create processes that would make things simpler. But when you have an evolving asset that constantly changes, new tech comes out, new codes come out, new code bases come out. You're adapting, you're changing, you're altering, you're adding more artificial intelligence, right? So it becomes, if anything, more convoluted, more difficult, and more lucrative for law firms.
Yeah.
Because more and more has to be adapted to, and like, it's ever changing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's fair to say it's very hard to patent technology. It's very difficult and it's very expensive. That's why you always see this battle between, technology being software, not hardware. Like in the hardware world, you see those lawsuits going back and forth between Samsung and Apple constantly, right? One of the numbers are astounding. Like, what is it? Lawsuits going back and forth are like $1.4 billion a year just in lawsuits going back, or more than that, going back between massive tech companies, right? Because Samsung will say, oh, Apple stole this idea from us, right? That's a trademark, lawsuit. Then Apple says, Samsung used this, lawsuit, counter lawsuit. So as you can see, it keeps on, it's very hard to because of evolving technology to patent and sue and it's really difficult. Software is even more difficult because ones and zeros are really hard to patent.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This is awesome. This is really helpful.
That's it.
Thank you.